Well, it's a sea day here on the Norwegian Jewel as we head toward the Panama Canal. And over the last week and a half, I've been asked a lot of random questions about cruising. So I thought I'd put them all together here and answer them because you might be curious about these things too. So the first question I've been asked is, what is considered a big cruise ship and what's considered a little or baby cruise ship? And this is in with the big lines of cruising companies. So a big cruise ship is 3,500 to 5,000 guests. A little ship or a baby ship is 2,000 to 2,500 guests. And then I get asked, which is better, a big ship or a baby ship? And the answer is both. It really depends on three factors. The first factor is what type of ages is your group comprised of. If you have multi-generational, a big ship a lot of times is a better fit because there are more activities for kids. There's more things like slides and race cars, and there's just more things to do. The second factor of whether to choose a big ship or little ship is the itinerary. Alaska is a prime example. In Alaska, the big ships that go from Seattle to Seattle, they can't get in the interior pass where all the icebergs are and the glaciers. They're just too big. So on those, you have more fun things to do on the ship, but you can't see as much of the environment of Alaska. On the baby ships, when it comes to Alaska, they can get in the inner passage, they can get in nooks and crannies, they can get you extremely close to icebergs and glaciers and the fjords, so you see a lot more of those things, including animals, whatever else that's right on the edge of the ocean. So in that case, I like the baby ships better. The third reason to choose a big ship or a baby ship is your personality. Remember I said it was 2,000 or 5,000 guests potentially? If you don't like a lot of crowds, a 5,000 person ship can be overwhelming, and that's why I recommend you choosing a smaller ship. Also, another reason to choose a smaller ship is if you really just don't like being around other people's kids. Because on a smaller ship, there really isn't as many activities for kids, so therefore people don't bring them on, so therefore you don't get exposed to them. So, the next question I get off to ask often a lot is whether you should fly in the day of the cruise or not. And my answer is most definitely, if there's any way, never fly in the day of a cruise. Because, especially in the world the way it is now with flying, you're very likely to have problems, either delay or cancellation, or a bag doesn't make it. And that would just make it a nightmare when you don't make it to your cruise because of a flight. So I always recommend my clients actually either come in at least one day before the cruise, so therefore you know comfortably and don't have the stress that you might miss your cruise. The same thing goes, people ask me, should they fly out the day of their cruise when it ends? And the answer is it depends on the price of your tickets. For example, on this cruise ship, if I flew out back to Dallas on the day the cruise ends, my ticket was $1,500 more expensive than if I stayed one more day in Cologne and flew out the next day. I had the same itinerary, I just get a $15 cheaper flight. And with the cost of being in Cologne for a hotel is significantly less, so I'm staying an extra night. Another question I get asked often is whether to use the cruise flights or not. Many cruise lines right now are offering free flights, second person flies free, things like that. And in all honesty, it sounds like a great deal, and it is a great price deal, but causes a lot of stress because when cruise ships are buying those flights, they're buying them in bulk and at discount. So usually you don't get your itinerary to a few weeks before. You also don't have the ability to move the flights around. Usually you're stuck with whatever they book for you, and you don't get your seats till a couple days before. So it causes a lot of stress because I guarantee if you get the ones the cruise ships books for you, you're never going to have the best itineraries. So if you're willing to go ahead and spend the money, I really recommend you go ahead and book outside of the cruise line your own flights because you have more control of the itinerary, you have more control of your seats, and you have less stress because you know you're actually going to make it in a timely manner to the cruise. So another question I get asked is the Haven worth on Norwegian? And the answer is, on the big ships, yes. If you're on the little ships, the Haven is not as full of experience as it is on the big ships. And on the little ships, I really don't say it's worth it unless you are in Alaska. In Alaska, on one of the little ships and the Haven, they give you access to a deck that's the very top of the ship that gives you more access to seeing all the wildlife and glaciers. So on a baby ship, the Haven is worth it in Alaska. In other places, I don't really think on the small ships that the Haven is worth it. On the big ships, if your personality is that you're willing to use the concierge and the butlers the way they're designed, it is amazing. And I truly recommend, if you can afford it for special occasions, bumping up and doing a Haven, because you are treated like royalty, but you have to use the services. If you're not willing to use the butlers and the concierge, then you might as well be down a balcony because it's not worth the difference in price. So, those are some of the questions I get asked, and I hope that it helps you out on figuring out more about cruises and your personality with cruising and what you would like to cruise like. If you have any more questions, just drop them in the comments below. I'm more than willing to help in any way that I can.